Paris. Restaurants and romance, empire and opera, fun, surprising experiences at every one of the more than 300 stops on the metro. My name is Lisa. I'm a writer and tour guide. I carry a Canadian passport, but all we'll need is a ticket for the metro system as I show you historic, inspirational, endlessly fabulous Paris. I'd like to share my love for this spectacular city with you, one stop after the next, by way of the exciting Paris metro system. So grab your French phrasebook and put on your walking shoes. We're going to Paris. Next stop, Butte Chaumont. Paris is a city of neighborhoods, and today we're visiting the wonderful quartier of the Butte Chaumont and Belleville. Come discover a large English-style park, come to a contemporary art vernissage, visit a fabulous cheese shop. This neighborhood is full of surprises and country charm, though it's surrounded by high-rises. We'll take a trip to Russia in this neighborhood and visit vineyards, community gardens, and one of my favorite bistros. This is one of the friendliest neighborhoods in Paris. Welcome to the wonderful Butte Chaumont neighborhood, which is gathered around my favorite park in the whole city of Paris. This area used to be known as Bald Hill, Mont Chauve, which eventually became known as the Butte Chaumont. Let's go explore the neighborhood. One of the most famous parks in the capital, the Butte Chaumont was traditionally a working-class neighborhood. The small streets are lined with houses and villas that look like a countryside daydream, vestiges of the worker housing that was originally built here on what was the edge of the city. Overlooking Belleville, the Butte Chaumont is one of the few hills in Paris. The word butte means hill. It's an area that has inspired many films. And Belleville is where famous singer Edith Piaf was born. Today it's a popular neighborhood where many newcomers come to put their mark on the city. This is one of the many entrances to the Butte Chaumont, a gorgeous park. Let's check it out. The Butte Chaumont metro station is at the top of the park, but the main park gates are down here across the street from the 19th arrondissement's town hall. Saturdays, you'll often see couples just married from the town hall run across the street to the park to have their wedding photos taken in front of the lovely flowers. The Butte Chaumont is every bit as romantic as Hyde Park in London or Mount Royal Park in Montreal. This popular spot is easily accessible because it's surrounded by several metro stations. Right from the first days of spring, the park's walkways and lawns are crowded with locals appreciating the sun and the flowers. The beautiful Butte Chaumont Park originally was a quarry. From the Middle Ages until the middle of the 19th century, there was gypsum quarried here, until gradually it was abandoned because it had run out. So the quarry here was used by criminals as a meeting place and slowly filled with garbage. The place was ripe for redevelopment. This former quarry was turned into a beautiful park during the Haussmann renovations of the Second Empire. The idea was to create an English-style wild garden because Napoleon III had spent part of his exile in London and he'd fallen in love with that style of public space. The redevelopment of the site began in 1864 under Napoleon III. After 3 years of intense work, the Butte Chaumont Park opened in 1867, at the same time as a universal exhibition in Paris. The park has a natural look that's unlike the straight lines and geometric shapes found in traditional French gardens designed in earlier centuries. The winding walkways create a natural, almost wild feeling. During the major renovations of the 19th century, entire neighborhoods of Paris were demolished to make way for these wide boulevards and new apartment buildings. The The poorest Parisians were chased from the heart of the city, and the man in charge of this metamorphosis, Baron Haussmann, was not the most popular man with the general population. But Haussmann had a knack for hiring brilliant engineers like his landscape designer Jean-Charles Alphand, who created a real gem in developing this Butte Chaumont Park. During construction, huge chunks of land were blown up with dynamite to use in creating a whole new landscape for this area, complete with a natural-seeming waterfall, a large lake, hillside trails, and elevated walkways. Alphand completely transformed a formerly sinister part of the city. Gardeners planted hundreds of different types of trees, shrubs, and flowers, and artist Rodin, a young man at the time, was hired to create concrete furniture for the park. In a city that has more than 400 parks, the Butte Chaumont is unique. Baron Haussmann and Jean-Charles Alphand created a timeless place away from the bustle of the big city. This is a romantic location with mysterious landscapes, bodies of water, and an artificial cave. Be sure to tour the cave to admire the beautiful waterfall and artificial stalactites, some of which are more than 25 feet tall. At this fork in the road, you might notice a railway track. This was known as the Petite Ceinture, the Little Belt, a 19th century railway that surrounded Paris until 1934, replaced by the metro, which had much better service. Belvedere Island is in the middle of the large lake. It's connected to the shore by two bridges, a stone bridge reaching 72 feet in height and a suspension bridge designed by Gustave Eiffel, the engineer of the Eiffel Tower. The island is topped by the Temple of the Sibyl, a shrine inspired by a Roman temple in Tivoli, Italy. Let's go up the 173-step staircase to see the view. The small temple at the top of the Butte Chaumont is a beautiful place for a stroll. It's also somewhere that ambitious joggers come to early in the morning to admire the view. The Butte Chaumont Park is one of Baron Haussmann's most inspired additions to the city of Paris. Parisians and visitors enjoy the park as much today as they did when it first opened. In fact, more than 3 million people visit this park every year. This is what is so wonderful about the Butte Chaumont. These hills in the sun, you can lounge and read and meet a friend for a picnic and soak up the sun. But if you don't come equipped for the picnic, I know a wonderful place within the limits of the Butte Chaumont where you can have something to eat. The Rosa Bonheur restaurant in the Butte Chaumont is a wonderful place to have a drink. It's actually referencing the guinguettes of the old working class neighborhood where you could go and drink and dance in the evening. During the daytime, you could also bring your kids and sit in the picnic tables outside and listen to music and color with them and generally enjoy yourself. It's a very relaxed, friendly place. It's open Wednesday through Sunday, and even after the park closes at night, it's open till midnight. It has its own entrance. Rosa Bonheur is located in a park pavilion that was built at the same time as the Butte Chaumont Park, just in time for the Paris Universal Exhibition of 1867. Today, along with offering drinks and tasty food, the team at Rosa Bonheur organizes many activities, including a choir and a women's soccer team, the Rosa team. So what I've ordered is a Rosa Summer specialty drink, which is named for Rosa Bonheur. And in fact, the restaurant is named for this painter named Rosa, who actually was the first woman to be given the Légion d'honneur award in 1865. She was this very academic painter, had really good knowledge of anatomy. She studied all kinds of animals. And she actually won the right to wear trousers in the city of Paris. She actually had to specially apply to be granted an exception so she could dress as a man and go and make the kinds of sketches she needed to as a painter. Now, if you get to the Butte Chaumont and you haven't brought a picnic with you, this is the place where you can pick up a great bite to eat. Let me show you. So what's great is this is a tapas bar. You can order a whole bunch of lovely things to take back into the park. Bonjour. En fait, j'aimerais bien un peu de charcuterie.
D'accord. Il faut vous reposer du jambon serrano.
Parfait, je prends ça.
Avec un peu de fromage peut-être.
So what I've ordered is some fantastic ham, some cheese, of course, because you can't have ham without cheese in France, and a lovely tapenade made with green olives and figs, which sounds just magical. And they'll, of course, give me bread to eat with that. And it's all going into the paper bag, and I can take it back to the park.
Ça, c'est le pain.
Okay, merci.
Alors, 18 €, s'il vous plaît.
Ok, parfait, c'est bon, ça y est. Merci beaucoup.
Bonne journée.
Off I go.
Let's stroll out of the park to Rue des Alouettes and get to know some creators of French contemporary art. We'll visit a gallery opening at the gallery called Le Plateau right after this. We're in delicious, delightful, delectable Paris, visiting the area around the Butte Chaumont metro station. This is in the northeast part of the French capital, a bit lesser known to tourists, and it's especially rewarding if you don't mind climbing an occasional hill or some stairs.
This is the Butte Bergère, which was the site of an Olympic stadium in 1924. Then the area was torn down and redeveloped into workers' cottages that were actually inaugurated by American dancer Josephine Baker. Today, this neighborhood feels a little bit like Moussaïa on the opposite side of the Butte Chaumont Park. And from here, the Butte Bergère, you get an amazing view of Sacré-Cœur and the city.
Along with its exceptional view of Paris, the Butte Bergère here in the 19th arrondissement is a quiet neighborhood with an exceptional quality of life. The hill here is built of soft ground, too unstable for modern high-rises, but just perfect for smaller housing. An active neighborhood community group maintains a lovely garden here. In France, all municipalities are allowed to make gardens available to the public. Access to these garden plots is free, but there's usually a long waiting list. In a world where too many people spend their lives in front of computer screens, these gardens are a great alternative. This place on Butte Bergère is managed by residents, each of whom have a small plot of land to cultivate. Tomatoes, lettuce, cucumbers, strawberries. Each square of earth produces something that contributes to the harvest in the fall, a celebration for gardeners who spend so much time caring for their plants throughout the spring and summer. This small group of residents has some ambitious plans for the garden. They're gradually claiming the land surrounding their plots to increase their cultivation. They're installing beehives, and eventually, they have plans for more rabbit hutches, like this one. In the Butte Bergère, there's even a vineyard. Paris boasts 10 small vineyards in the heart of Paris. Together, they produce a few hundred liters of wine per year. White wines such as Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Muscat, and Chasselas, and a red wine, Pinot Noir. They're all produced in Paris. The Butte Bergère overlooks the neighborhoods of Jourdain and Belleville, which include parts of the 19th and 20th arrondissement. These former working-class neighborhoods are now a great mix for different immigrant groups and artists, making it a very cultural neighborhood.
So when you're visiting the neighborhood, keep your eye open for porte ouverte, i.e. open doors to artist studios, and vernissage, or openings to exhibitions, like this one at the Plateau, just above Butte Chaumont.
Le Plateau is an art gallery that depends on a public organization that supports contemporary art in Paris. Since opening in 2002, the gallery has become a landmark in the contemporary art scene in France. It organizes several exhibitions each year, which allow people to discover new talents along with more established artists.
Le Plateau is also really interesting because it really does a lot of outreach into the community here. It runs workshops for children of all different ages and also encourages collaborations between artists of different disciplines. So you have writers working with dancers, performing here to new music. You also have some filmmakers involved in the exhibitions. So it's a real meeting place for collaboration.
With artists installing themselves in studios in Belleville and different underground events happening around the neighborhood, Le Plateau was the first official government-sponsored gallery that opened here.
This exhibition at the Plateau is called Painted Black. All the works were selected on the basis that they're in black and white. That's really the only main unifying feature, and they range from installations to films to black and white photographs, and even a very mysterious fog-filled room right at the end.
The organizers here present projects that are a little outside the mainstream, which makes this gallery unique. Artists showing work in the northeast of Paris are known for their more experimental attitudes, compared with galleries in other parts of the city.
This is the Quartier Jourdain. It's a wonderful shopping area on the far side of the Butte Chaumont Park. If you go along Rue de Belleville with me, we'll discover some fabulous little food shops and specialty places.
Rue de Belleville is well worth exploring, especially if you're looking for a unique souvenir to take home to friends who want something more unusual than an Eiffel Tower keychain. You can also try some of the small cross streets off Rue de Belleville, like Rue de la Villette. One of my favorites is L'Embellie Design, just down here.
Here we are at L'Embellie Design, which is a wonderful little shop opened by Coralie 6 years ago in this village atmosphere of Rue de la Villette. It's a wonderful place to shop for gifts, especially because Coralie has a great eye for unusual materials and a quirky sense of humor. My favorite gift in here is the playing cards, which are special post-revolutionary French playing cards. All the kings and queens have been decapitated.
Coralie, the owner of Embellie, takes special care to choose the original objects that remind her of her childhood. She loves color and humor, and many of her products come from local artists and artisans. The French have a reputation for doing what they want. After the 1951 election, the famous General de Gaulle said in frustration, "How do you govern a country where there are 258 kinds of cheese?" Today, France produces even more varieties of cheese, so let's discover some of the best ones right after this. We're in entertaining, extravagant, edible Paris, a city with incredible cultural and gastronomic richness. Here, it's inconceivable to finish a meal without some good cheese. France produces a staggering number of cheeses, which makes it difficult to choose what to eat. So come with me to meet the experts at Beaufils who can give us advice.
Here we are at Beaufils Fromager. It's a wonderful cheese shop because they have their own cellar, a cheese cave, where they do the aging of the cheeses themselves. Sometimes it takes several years for the cheeses to be just perfect.
This is cheese expert Emmanuel. Here the merchants actually get to know the dairy farmers who make the cheese.
Époisse is a cheese from Burgundy. It's this cheese down here. And I happen to love it, but the ones that I'm used to are really strong. And what Emmanuel is telling me is actually they have an Époisse, which is one of the last Époisse producers who actually makes the cheese himself. He has the cows, the milk. It's a very direct, small production, and they're much subtler, they're much butterier than the big production Époisse, so I'm really looking forward to trying this one.
Emmanuel shows me all sorts of goat cheeses near the window here.
First of all of their chèvres are made by very small producers, and you can actually go on the cheese shop's website and see videos of people making the cheeses, which is kind of fabulous. And this cheese he just showed me, he said is a really friendly, amicable cheese, which I think is a great description for goat cheese. This cheese that I'm getting is made by Monsieur and Madame Branche, who live in the Savoie, and Emmanuel was saying that their goats are beautifully looked after, and you know, I actually quite like goats. I think they're really cute animals, so I'm going to get this goat cheese. This is lovely cheese. This Roquefort producer, the Roquefort Carle, is the last Roquefort producer who makes their cheese utterly traditionally, which means that the mold in the Roquefort is actually grown on loaves of bread inside the cave. There's a special baker in the town where they are from that makes the bread, that grows the mold in the cave, that ends up making the cheese blue.
Don't be shy, you can always ask to taste before you buy. This is a forme de Montbrison from the Loire.
This cheese is unusual, especially because you can eat the rind of it, and he says it's really the kind of cheese you want to put on your favorite music, sit down, have a glass of champagne, and a little bit of this blue cheese, which sounds great, don't you think?
Come meet Christophe, the owner of Beaufils Cheese Shop. He'll show us around his cheese cellar. But before going in, I have to take some precautions so we can meet hygiene standards.
Okay, so now I get the sport of putting on my shoes. Wish me luck. It's trickier than it looks. Okay, one shoe. This is what they don't tell you about making cheese, that there's all this other stuff you've got to worry about. Okay, I'm ready. Oh wow, this is beautiful. This is so cool. They keep the cheeses in the cellar and they look after them. They brush them. Sometimes they brush them with white wine to get them to develop. Sometimes they brush them just to keep the crust in good shape. Because some of these cheeses spend a year down here, so you have to keep looking after them because a cheese is a living food. It's not inert. This cheese is from Aveyron, which is produced by someone who also makes a Roquefort. It's a sheep cheese. And this particular cheese, because it's aging down here in the cellar, periodically they have to bring it out and brush it off, because the crumbs that form on the crust, if they stay and sink into the cheese gets bitter. You can't use the same brush on different cheeses. You have to go out, re-sterilize your hands. If you're going to use a completely different kind of cheese, you've got to be really serious about it. There's actually a special light fan down here that keeps bugs from getting into the cheeses, especially in summer. It gets really hot. You don't want any kind of bug to come in here, so if there's any tiny little fruit fly or anything, it gets sucked into the light there. to keep the cheeses in a really pristine environment. It's almost like a laboratory of cheese down here. This cheese, the mimolette, is interesting because it's really orange inside, it's really dense and hard, and it was apparently Charles de Gaulle, the famous president of France, was his favorite cheese of all the cheeses in France. And this particular cheese is about 2 years old. They can be up to 3 years old down here. They're just spending a lot of time in this cheese cellar. This particular cheese shop here in Belleville, near the Butte Chaumont, actually has a long-standing relationship of getting cheeses from Neal's Yard in London. So it's one of the only places in Paris where you can get some of these amazing English cheddars. So this cheddar is wrapped in 4 or 5 layers of linen, very, very fine linen, which protects the cheese. And you have to wipe down the outside of the linen so that the molds don't grow too quickly, and you actually wipe them down with the equivalent of baby wipes, with sort of alcoholized wipes to clear off the mold, and then it'll start growing again, just so it develops really slowly. This cheese here is from May 2011, so it's already almost 2 years old at this point in time.
Unable to resist the amazing English cheddar, I finished the cellar tour with a small tasting.
Oh, it's great cheese, but it's a wonderful cheddar. It's really creamy afterwards and really strong. It's great. Thank you.
In France, a meal often ends with cheese and a tiny sweet dessert, followed by a good strong coffee. Let's visit the small shop in the Rue de Belleville where I get my coffee right after this. We're visiting exciting, enchanting Paris, a city that's in constant, energetic motion. Could the secret of its dynamism be in the unbridled consumption of coffee? Let's come to Jourdain Brûlerie to meet Gaston Berthier, who's the son of the shop's founder. This store, near the Jourdain Church, has been open since 1956.
I am here because I'm doing a brunch on Sunday, and I would like to get some coffee for my little Italian coffee pot. The one like that. Yeah, it's like that. What do you recommend?
Oh, Colombia. Colombie,
okay.
Café bien équilibré.
Okay, so for my brunch, Gaston recommends the Colombian coffee, and he roasts it right here, and it's beautiful coffee.
Ground.
Yes, please. Yeah, it's great. Wow. It's almost like eating chocolate, you know? You get this whole, it's wonderful. Thank you. It's got a wonderful bouquet, the Colombian coffee. At the end of the day, you must be covered in coffee dust.
I smell coffee. This is my natural perfume.
While the Jourdain Brûlerie is paradise for lovers of coffee, Gaston also offers a wide selection of teas.
Gaston's explaining that the difference between coffee and tea, there's this infinite variety of tea. But coffee is much more limited because it's perishable. You know, it's got a very short shelf life where it's going to be really delicious. Once you have roasted the coffee, the roasted beans last about 2 months. And once you've ground the coffee, you better use it quickly because it'll only be good for about a month as long as you keep it in the fridge. Otherwise, just the perfume disappears.
Near the huge roasting machine, Gaston shows me the different varieties of coffee he offers customers.
There are 2 big kinds of coffee families. The Robusta grows, this one, the Robusta, grows in the low altitudes. It's very uneven. The colors are different. It's almost like river pebbles, different kinds of
Il
colors.
y a du noir, il y a du vert, il y a du blanc, il y a du jaune.
Yeah.
C'est très mixte. Ça, c'est Arabica. Et tu peux voir, c'est du Colombie. Tu peux voir la beauté du grain qui est parfaite. Tout est pareil.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
couleur.
green. It's a Colombian Arabica, which is a higher growing, higher altitude plant.
And here is a very special coffee that smells of camphor. It comes from the Malabars in the Indian Ocean.
Initially, the coffee beans would come from India to Europe by boat. It took about a month. The coffee beans got quite damp, and it affected their flavor. And people got used to this flavor. So now, even though the coffee is shipped by plane, it takes maybe 5 hours instead of a month. You have to replicate this flavor in the coffee beans. So before they're shipped out from India, during the monsoon season, the beans sit in an open-walled warehouse where they get nice and damp, and that flavor that the Europeans learned to love grows on them, and then they get flown out, so they still taste as if they've traveled by boat for a month.
This is why this coffee called Indian Malabar Moussonné.
What's wonderful about Gaston is that he actually roasts the coffee here himself. It's the brûlerie, and it has a roasting machine that has been here since 1956 when the shop opened. Gaston was explaining that he's taken about 2 years to really understand how to be a master coffee roaster. And not only is it the time and looking at the color of the beans changing, you can also hear when the beans are ready. The coffee makes a specific kind of sound that he listens to, and that's how he knows it's time to take the beans out. Ah, it smells amazing. It's great.
Et voila, once the coffee is roasted, it's ready to be sold and ready to be enjoyed. France has long been a haven for immigrants and refugees. In the 1920s, Paris saw the arrival of tens of thousands of Russians who were fleeing the Soviet Revolution. These people stayed in Paris and could often be found in their own Russian cafes and places of worship.
This is the Russian Orthodox Church, Saint Serge. It's been here since 1924, and you can come here. It's open to the public for its garden and for its Sunday morning services in Russian at 10 a.m. every week.
To visit the church, you have to push open an iron gate, walk through a small courtyard, and climb the stairs. This church of Saint Serge of Radonneige is one of my favorite secrets in Paris. Before becoming an Orthodox church, it was a Protestant parish that took care of poor German immigrants in the neighborhood. Abandoned after the First World War, the site was bought by the Russian community as a place of worship and meeting for its members. It's a place of meditation where you can enjoy a moment of peace surrounded by stunning murals and icons. This little corner of Russia in Paris is full of the history of this community, evocative of the way Paris has sometimes sheltered people from everywhere in the world. We'll now leave the Saint Serge Church to venture down Rue de Crimée to visit a bakery I just love. Especially after all the cheese we tasted in the Beau-Fils, we definitely need some bread. The French have a well-deserved reputation for making excellent baguettes, and if you want to taste really special breads, you should visit Véronique Mauclair, one of the few women bakers in Paris. Her shop dates from 1920 and is classified as a historical monument. You can find a wide variety of breads and pastries here: whole grain, pistachio, orange blossom, and cinnamon. Everything, of course, cooked traditionally in a wood oven. Next, let's take a walk through what will seem like a country village. We'll visit the charming Mouzaya neighborhood right after the break. We're in the wonderful city of Paris, visiting the areas around its metro stations. Today we're in Chaumont, a calm and welcoming neighborhood that rewards visitors.
This is the Quartier Moussaïa, just up the hill from Butte Chaumont. Used to be known as the Quartier Amérique because urban myth had it that the gypsum quarried here was used to build the White House. That isn't true. But what's lovely about this neighborhood is there are still quite a few tiny, charming streets filled with lovely workers' housing. There used to be many more of these streets, but they were torn down. Fortunately, this neighborhood survived.
The Moussaïa, also called Little Moussaïa, takes its name from a battle that took place during the War of Conquest of Algeria in 1840. Because of the gypsum quarry, the terrain below the houses looks like a gigantic piece of Swiss cheese. It's impossible to construct large buildings here, so only small village-like houses have been built. The neighborhood is something like a small maze, perfect for wandering and getting lost on purpose. Because of its narrow streets, part of the Moussaïa is closed to cars, much to the appreciation of pedestrians. We can stroll quietly and enjoy the charm of this hidden corner of Paris. Most of the cottages were built in the late 19th century during the capital's period of great modernization. If we now walk through the quiet streets to enjoy the charm of the area, it's thanks to the people who live in Moussaïa. In the 1970s, this area was in terrible condition. The houses were dilapidated, the streets were full of potholes, and the sewer system was a disaster. But a group of residents came together to save the area from total demolition. They were able to get the city of Paris on their side to help save homes, redo the romantic cobblestones on the streets, and install appropriate street lighting. In Moussaïa, these little streets are called villas. Originally, they were private passages for people to access their homes. During the rehabilitation of the area during the 1970s, the city expropriated the passages in order to improve maintenance and open them to the public. Each villa is surrounded by about 30 houses, and each has a colorful name such as Bellevue or Villa du Danube.
This is the Hameau Danube that you know you're approaching because of these really charming details from the 1920s. This hameau is a complex of small houses that was built in 1923 and actually won an award for its facade. It's one of the many charming neighborhoods in this area.
Moussaïa and the hameau are places where time seems to have stopped at the beginning of the 20th century. But just look up and you'll see the residential towers that ring this atmospheric corner of old Paris. Over here, we're past the edge of the gypsum quarries, and the ground is strong enough to build up.
Place des Fêtes is one of the highest points in Paris, although it's difficult to see the view because we're surrounded by 1970s skyscrapers. In fact, to get a feeling for the neighborhood, you might want to watch a wonderful movie, Paris Je t'aime, which is a series of short films that take place all over Paris in different arrondissements. One of the most moving and tragic of the shorts takes place right in this spot in Place des Fêtes.
The Place des Fêtes is a harsh concrete reality in Paris. Its nickname is Place des Fêtes, or Place of Defeat.
5 euros les poils, 5 euros.
But when the sun comes out and it's a market day, the atmosphere changes dramatically for the better.
The market in Place des Fêtes is a real souk of a place. It's on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. The weekend, Sunday is the day to come because here on the weekend you can buy everything from food to socks to clothes and curtains.
In every neighborhood, the local street market gives you a real feeling for the community. It's a great opportunity to meet the locals and make surprising discoveries.
Tu me donnes ce que tu veux, 100 euros, 200 euros, 300 euros. Tu me donnes ce que tu veux. T'inquiète pas, je descends comme un toboggan. 10 euros.
some of the market traders are clever and try to persuade you to buy the most unlikely objects, things you might not want to pack into your suitcase and take all the way home. After a long day exploring one of my favorite neighborhoods in Paris, we'll take the time to eat a traditional French meal. Come with me to Chez Que du Bon, a typical Parisian bistro near the Butte Chaumont Park. Que du Bon means only good things, and you'll realize why the establishment deserves its name.
What's wonderful here is Gilles, the proprietor, has such strong feelings about the menu. His son is the chef, and they really think about what's available, what's in season. All the meat is organic, and the wines, we will talk about the wines because it's wonderful.
Meet Gilles, the owner of Que du Bon, and discover the wonderful wines here right after this. We're in the delightful Butte Chaumont area of Paris at the very local Que du Bon restaurant.
Gilles knows so many wonderful vin naturel producers, winemakers who are committed to organic grapes, but they're also really committed to natural winemaking, no weird additives, no chemicals, very low sulfite level, which means you do not get a headache from Gilles' wines here. It's wonderful. So for tonight, I'm just putting myself entirely in his hands. He's going to bring me a white to start with and some red for my main meal. Aha!
Hop, on est parti avec un petit peu de blanc, voilà.
Okay, merci bien. So I have a Clos du Neuf, a Cheverny, wonderful. And it's natural, so it's a tiny bit cloudy and smells great. Oh, that's great. That's a nice thing to start with. Now, Gilles actually knows all the winemakers personally. He has some of them actually come up to Paris for special soirees where he serves food and has people taste a whole bunch of new wines. He's really committed to knowing where your food and drink comes from.
Lisa.
Oh, wow.
Sweet Lisa.
The carpaccio. Thank you.
Et puis une asperge blanche, des premières asperges.
This is this amazing freshly made carpaccio, and it's served with olive oil made by one of Gilles' friends in Greece, Alessandro. Now, another thing about this restaurant is seasons. It's spring, so lamb is in season. That's why I'm having lamb as my main meal. And Gilles insisted that I try the asparagus because it's spring, and it's essential that I give it a try. So, have a little bite of the asparagus. Because that's the other thing with these classic French personal bistros. You really have to allow the owner to wrap you up in his idea of what you should be eating right now, because he's right. The asparagus is perfect right now.
Avec l'agneau, on va boire un vin de Côte-du-Rhône qui s'appelle un baume de Venise.
So I have a Baume de Venise, which is mostly a Syrah wine, and Gilles has told me that it will bring out a slightly strong taste of the lamb wonderfully, so I can't wait. Oh, wow.
Et voilà le carré d'agneau de Bellac.
This is lamb from Bellac. It's a special region and an appellation. So just like wine has certain territories and names, the organic meats in France do as well. And this is the season for lamb. If you're going to go out for an evening with friends to the small local bistro, you want only great food and only a good atmosphere and good advice, and that's what they're committed to at Que du Bon. And it really comes through in what you end up eating.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Gilles has very strong feelings about what order you eat the cheese in. You start with the chèvre, you move on through the brie, and you finish with the hard cheese, which is a sheep cheese, so it's a very, very strong, kind of intense cheese. And he's given me an Alsatian wine, very sweet to drink with the cheese. Should be marvelous. He also only serves you butter at the end of the meal with the cheese. Because before that, you should be paying attention to your meal and the olive oil used in your meal. The butter is almost like a cheese unto itself. Okay.
Voilà, on va mettre un vin doux, moelleux.
Oh, wow. Gilles insists that I try the melting chocolate dessert, which is served with what they call a crème anglaise, which is basically a light custard sauce. And he insists that you have chocolate with a very, very light rounded burgundy, which is a dessert burgundy. Really unusual wine and fabulous dessert. Why not? Okay, bye-bye. What's wonderful about the 19th is that in this old working-class neighborhood beside this huge park, you have people reinventing the traditions that make Paris great. The sense of neighborhood, the fact that people know each other and care about each other, and actually really care about food and wine and music and art. That's why I love the 19th. Let's see what we can get up to next time on Paris Next Stop.